Shortus and his artillerymen return home after the siege of the city of Dover. Along with them are the two martial soldiers known as Beryl and Scott, both of whom were taken prisoner by Shortus and his men after their defeat, who also had only joined the Battle of Dover after their helicopter was shot down by rebel soldiers, an extremely unfortunate turn of events. Hello my dear friends and welcome back to the Rimworld Mining Empire. I'm not gonna lie to you, I still am getting over some strep throat and I probably don't sound the best, but I'm gonna do my best to give you guys a good episode here. I sure hope so at least, because today's episode is very action-packed. We have a lot going on, there's a lot to unpack and to break down today, and a lot to discuss. One of the biggest things to discuss, probably our number one concern at this time, or at least for the marshals in general, rebel attacks are at an all-time high. Even here in the northern mountains, where it is very cold and whatnot, and you wouldn't think that there'd be a lot of movement, the rebels are extremely active, shockingly. So with that being said, we need to think of better ways to defend ourselves from rebel sieges and rebel attacks. So one of the very first things we're going to be doing today is deconstructing a lot of our old defenses to make room for some new ones, as well as kind of expanding our borders with the defenses. Just as well, something that we're trying to make room for is a landing strip. Now, I hear you say to yourself, a landing strip? What? YVHNII, what are you talking about? Well, let me ask you this. What is the best defense? Did you say a good offense? You're so stupid. Oh, no, wait, actually, yes, you are correct. It is a good offense. So, something that I feel would be a wonderful offense would be a plane. If we had a plane at the Mining Empire, for one, we could help defend surrounding settlements around us, or even engage in good offenses against rebels who are on missions, things like that. But we could also use it to offensively defend the Mining Empire when we're getting raided. However, that's all well and good, but a plane takes a lot of components, so we had sent out a caravan to retrieve plenty of components for us. And to which, of course, they returned. I think we needed like 74 components or something like that. I think we got a little bit over that or right around that. We had traded a lot of the firearms that we got through previous raids to the local settlements for these components. In the meantime, though, we began working on our landing strip, because a plane without a landing strip is like a YVHNII video without some shitty jokes. It just doesn't work. That took a little while, but once it was finally complete, Captain Hawthorne commissioned Happy Oak to build our beautiful bomber. Now, we felt that this transition from helicopters to planes was a brilliant idea as well, and the reason for that, planes are much faster, they fly much higher, it's going to be a lot harder for the rebels to shoot down a bomber than it would be for a helicopter. Now, of course, that does not mean that we're giving up on helicopters completely. We may build another in the future, assuming, of course, we have the resources anytime soon. We do have to give some of those to the overall government so they can continue with infrastructure as well as the war effort. But of course, our plans of planes and helicopters only goes so far as our fuel will take us, right? If we run out of gas in the sky, it's going to be a bad day. So to help with this, so we're not constantly having to buy fuel, we had Lieutenant Verne build us a biofuel refinery. This bad boy is going to allow us to turn plant matter into fuel. And there's no doubt in my mind that this is some type of ambitious schematic that was originally drawn up by Captain Hawthorne in his studies. In the meantime, though, we began some strip mining operations on some very small sandstone hills nearby the Mining Empire base. We're going to attempt to ramp up operations here at the Mining Empire with rebel attacks at an all-time high. The Empire is going to be needing resources now more than ever throughout this war. We ended up starting a bit of a strip mining operation just above of the base directly north. After digging through this section, we realized that the western side was actually completely hollow, a section that we originally thought was just more mountain. Sometime later, we ended up receiving a telegraph stating that there were some rebels camped out nearby with what appeared to be an item stash. Now, this item stash could be many things. It could be bootlegged alcohol, it could even be toxic bombs and whatnot, as we had seen previously. Regardless, we needed to take care of this. Now, given the heightened threat against flying vehicles recently, Captain Hawthorne thought it would be a good idea if they scouted out on foot first and then had air support come in later. Now, they had no way to easily communicate this information back to the mining empire, so the idea was that if Captain Hawthorne and the others came back, that means that they saw something and the plane should not take off. Now, I know that may sound stupid, but if the captain doesn't come back from the mission at all, that plane needs to fly and find it. Plus, we don't have portable radios just yet, so there was no easy way to communicate without bringing a massive radio with them, which maybe is a viable option for the future though. Regardless though, not too long after we arrive at the item stash, Lieutenant Verne began loading himself and some bombs up in the plane to provide us with air support. He immediately took off and began heading this way, where he then promptly dropped 2 cans of large ass kickery on those rebel sons of bitches. Actually, now that I think of it, maybe it was just 1 can, but look, we're still learning to fly the damn thing. Don't get your panties in a twist. Just after the bomb detonated, Captain Hawthorne moved the team up into position and began firing at the remaining rebels. With most of them injured or killed from the bomb, they were easily dispatched by Hawthorne and the team. The team then got into position near the item stash and prepared to open it. Let's see what those damn dirty rebels are trying to smuggle under our noses. Just as we had feared, it would appear they were smuggling a couple of mortars and several different types of mortar shells. However, this group is very small to be a siege. It is very possible they were delivering these weapons, or they had planned up to meet with a larger group to then perform the siege. These weapons could have even been a part of an attack that was coming for us. Regardless though, I'm just happy that we found these and we were able to defeat the rebels. The journey back home would be quite long, as Hawthorne had decided that he would walk the squad all the way back. Sure, we could have asked Lieutenant Verne to pick us up in the plane, but the problem is if there's some rebels hiding somewhere and we don't see them, they could get a lucky shot and then it's over. It is going to be extremely important that we use this plane very strategically. It costs a lot of resources, but something that we can't get back is Beryl as well as Scott. I also want to take a moment to address the fact that I've always called Beryl Beryl for some reason. I don't know why I read it like that, and I apologize. I bet you guys want to stick a pencil in your ear every time you heard that, but I am ever so glad that you didn't. Now, some time later, we ended up having 2 nomads who said that a flash storm had burnt down their village and they needed a place to stay for a while. Now, what that sounded like to Captain Hawthorne is that they needed jobs as soldiers here and/or slaves. So he quickly accepted their offer of enlistment and/or free labor, whether they knew that or not. As the 2 nomads approached, the captain as well as a few of our soldiers met them out there on the helipad. The captain quickly ordered 2 of our soldiers to approach the 2 nomads and then, of course, arrest them. However, the nomads did not like this idea, and one of them even fought back. Fought back, as it were. Fought, as in past tense, as in, you know, like something you might say if someone is dead now. Hey, but that's okay. Hey, look, calm down. Don't sweat it. Don't worry about it, because look, best 1 out of 2 ain't too bad. We got 1 nomad. Sure, one of them's getting put in the body pile, but we might have a soldier and/or miner on our hands here. Now, some time later, Captain Hawthorne ordered Happy Oak to work on a new schematic for a bomb crafting bench. These new bombs, of course, would be what we would be dropping from our planes. I suppose the rebel item cache has the captain a bit on edge, a bit paranoid. Given the mortars and the mortar shells and whatnot that we found there, though, it's a bit hard to blame him for being paranoid. As we seen on that mission as well, though, dropping bombs from our plane was an excellent offense. However, the bomb that we had dropped on the item cache mission was simply, I think, 200 pounds, 220 pounds, something like that. The captain has something better in mind. The captain has crafted a prototype 1,000-pound unguided bomb. Now, how effective will this bomb really be against rebels? That is still to be determined, but if we were to have a siege or any massive raids, we'll definitely be able to find out. Sometime later, after several attempts, Konar finally broke the spirits of the nomad known as Norman. With her spirits broken, she decided, hey, you know what, maybe I'll join these people and die in their war, which we were grateful for. We allowed her her to don a rifle and one of our beautiful brown winter operations uniforms. Now she fits right in with the rest of us. She was so grateful and excited for this new opportunity to die for our cause, she even threw a party for everyone under the Empire. Truly a kind act, of course. If only we could have more soldiers like Norman. Hopefully, as we have more refugees and more nomads and rebels and things like that, we can try to convert them over to martialism. But with that being said, we now have a massive group of rebels who are coming to try and siege the mining empire. It would appear that those weapons that we had found originally at the item stash were related to this siege. They were most likely going to link up with these rebels to try and attack us. However, we did just recently create a prototype massive unguided bomb, which we feel may be useful in this situation. So Hawthorne decided to take Norman on a bombing run so she can kind of get the idea of it. And hey, if it works, no more rebels. The bomb has been dropped and... whoa. I would say that that was a successful bomb. It would appear that Captain Hawthorne has really outdone himself once again with his schematics and research into these types of weapons. With enough of these unguided 1,000-pound bombs, or even larger bombs at that, we could level entire rebel cities. However, of course, the only limiting factor there is the fact that we would have to use fuel and steel every single time, and fuel is a bit scarce here in the northern mountains, even with trees and stuff like that. With biofuel refining, we don't have a lot of trees. But maybe with this successful test of this bomb, we could convince the overall government with a bit of funding for some fuel or something like that. Now, in the meantime, we are going to be digging out a fairly large section of the mountain to add on to the base, and the reason we are doing this is for animals. Yes, we want plenty of animals here. Well, by plenty I mean probably like wargs or dogs or something like that, as shown in a comment from our good friend known as Bone Growth. Bone Growth, I totally agree with you. However, I don't know if we'll be able to get wargs. The only wargs we've seen here in the north are the ones that the rebels actually use against us, so I'm not sure, but we'll find something. I wasn't really looking for any riding animals per se, more of like attack and defense animals. We don't really need riding animals, I don't think, because we have helicopters and planes and stuff like that, so we want to go for wargs or dogs or something for defense. And the problem being as well, we don't have wolves or wargs or anything here in the north, hardly ever. I think the only thing I've really ever seen is maybe like a polar bear or a grizzly bear or something like that up this way, so we can't tame animals. So the idea was that we would load up a bunch of guns into our plane and fly to local settlements to try and buy animals. Unfortunately though, they did not have any animals to sell, so we only ended up buying fuel. Which was fine because we did actually need fuel like we talked about earlier, but you can't train a can of fuel to attack your enemies, or can you? No, unfortunately you cannot. That is what we in the business call a joke. Ironically though, after our soldiers returned home, we ended up having a caravan from these same settlements who were coming here originally to trade with us, and they actually ended up having Labrador retrievers, so go figure. Unfortunately, they only had 3 Labrador retrievers, but that's fine because I think there were 2 females and 1 male, so we can breed them to be an unstoppable martial dog force. Of course, at some point that will mean that someone will need the official title of Hound Master. So based on, I believe it was Nubian Beauty's comment, I think from the last episode or episode before, she wanted us to give the children mineral-like names. Well, since we don't have a lot of children, I've decided that we'll start giving those to animals as well. And since we're only breeding these 3 dogs for the entire empire, that means we're going to have inbred dog babies, baby. It is a Rat Night tradition that every series we must have some type of inbred animals in our empire. And by God, I will not break tradition today. Sometime later, and Captain Hawthorne called Severn and Slate into the armory. It was time that these little youngsters learn how to shoot some machine guns. You never know when you might have an occupying enemy force take over your entire empire, and then your children have to try and kill people. I should put that on a t-shirt. Anyhow though, he marched their stubby little legs through the deep snow just due north where he had set up a few barrels for some target practice. Captain Hawthorne gave them the green light. The 2 little tykes just had the biggest smiles on their faces. They were so excited to unleash death upon these barrels. This little training exercise would also help Captain Hawthorne realize that the 2 of them needed a lot more practice, so he would let Lieutenant Verne know so that they could take them out on more practice shootings at hunting trips, things like that. Just a good bit of good old fatherly bonding. And now with that being said, a little bit of time later, I think we realize that Trog, our massive Thromboian miner that we enslaved, is having a little bit of trouble seeing in the dark, and he would also like to have a nice mining helmet, just like Happy Oak and Lurkot. Well, to be fair, what he would really like is his freedom, and to probably kill every single soldier in the Marshal Service government. But that'll never happen. You better just stick to the mines, Trog, you big lug, you big silly boy. While the slaves are mining away, Hawthorne and Lieutenant Vern thought this would be a good ample opportunity for some of that nice fatherly bonding on a hunting trip to kill a mega sloth. They even decided to bring their 3 new hounds along with them. This massive mega sloth would be some crucial calories throughout the winter for our soldiers. Not only that, of course, though, this would be an ample learning experience once again for the children on shooting discipline in general, hunting, etc., all these great things. It was also the first hunt for our dogs as well, so this would be a good demonstration of just how powerful they would be in small numbers even, and just how useful the dogs would actually be to the colony. We brought the mega sloth back home where Frit would cut it up and turn it into meals for all of our wonderful soldiers and mediocre slaves. Now, something interesting about Frit here that I have not mentioned yet is the fact that she and our beautiful Thromboian miner Trog here are now lovers. This happened a little while back, but I forgot to mention it. Just as well, though, this is a secret. It's not as though they're going around telling everyone, because obviously the Marshals would not like this. Plus, if they were to accidentally have any children or anything like that, it could cost them all their lives. However, though, sometime later we received a massive resource collection caravan that came in the dead of night. Now, this caravan was heavily guarded, not only by soldiers, but also by several hounds, as well as massive armored mega sloths. These new means of protection and whatnot, and the size and power of this caravan is no doubt due to the last one being attacked. Based on what I'm seeing here with this caravan, however, I'm almost positive it would take a small to medium-sized army of rebels to actually take it down. The idea here this time around is that we are going to be providing them with plenty of slate once again, and the reason we keep providing the Empire essentially with slate, it is our most common resource here under the mining empire. We're also going to be providing them with a little bit of steel. Now, we don't have a lot of steel because of all the defenses, the planes, and helicopters we've been having to make, so we'll only be able to give a little bit of that, unfortunately. Now, while our soldiers were loading up the resource caravan with slate blocks, Captain Hawthorne was actually talking to the private. He ended up giving him a letter that was meant for his sister. Just as well, the private was also letting him know about a local raid that was being conducted against a group of rebels. There is a small settler town nearby that is actually a rebel hideout, and the attack against them is being led by a marshal captain known as Mitchell. Now, of course, Captain Hawthorne is familiar with Captain Mitchell, so he had the decision to make. Would he fly in with the plane and try to give him some backup? Mitchell wasn't exactly a good friend of Hawthorne's or anything like that, but he was part of the Marshal Service, damn it. They would have to go in and help their friends in this battle. Even if Captain Mitchell can handle the battle on his own, and it's hard to say because he too, just as Captain Hawthorne, has a very small squad of soldiers, at the very least our assistance may make their victory go quicker. And who knows, it very well may turn out that they were in desperate need of our help. Unfortunately, we don't have any more 1,000-pound bombs, which probably for the best we would level the town, but we do have a few more 200-pound bombs. And these 200-pound bombs are going to be much better for some precision strikes, so if there's any groups of rebels that we could drop them on, or any artillery or anything like that. Cut to the small town known as Preston that was being liberated by Captain Mitchell and his forces. It would appear that the rebels were dug in extremely deep. It is possible that Captain Mitchell and his men did have this under control, but I am glad that we showed up. Mitchell appeared to be using toxic gas against the rebel scum, which is a wonderful plan, to be honest with you, because the rebels have very little access to gas masks and things like that. They were even shelling the city streets with toxic gas mortar shells. However, with that being said, it would appear that a small group of artillerymen just outside the town were also about to begin shelling the Marshal soldiers. This would be extremely catastrophic for Mitchell and his team. It's a good thing that we're around. It's also a good thing that we had already planned for a situation just like this. We bombed the rebel artillery, destroying them. Hawthorne and his small team landed the plane nearby. We did have a few more bombs left, however, the battle was so tight-knit within the city at this point, if we were to begin bombing inside the city, friendly fire was almost a guarantee. So instead, we decided to enter the town of Preston on foot, where we would join in with Captain Mitchell. We saw the captain's men running by all of our soldiers, and then the captain sped by us on a horse. With them advancing farther into the city, it would appear that they were pushing the rebels back, but as previously mentioned, of course, they are digging in deeper and deeper by the second, so of course we pursued behind them shortly after. As Hawthorne and his squad approached, Mitchell was already in a gunfight with the rebels. An icy breeze blew through the frozen streets of the town, but any noise of an icy breeze was toned out by all the gunfire. An icy breeze was also not the only thing that was filling the streets of the town. Mitchell's team was filling the streets with plenty of poisonous gas for the rebels. They had almost no way to combat this, of course. There was only one thing for them to do. They sent Thromboian warriors to flank our soldiers from the side. This was, of course, in an effort to try and get the upper hand over our soldiers and stop the toxic gas from flowing, then giving them an advantage. Luckily, we did defeat them, however. With many of the rebels dead, Mitchell decided to take a team through the city streets to try and kill the others. Captain Mitchell would take Norman and Konar along with him, leaving several of his troops, of course, under the command of Captain Hawthorne, during which point some rebels began donning gas masks, and just as well, unfortunately, they would also break out the big guns. Luckily, Hawthorne did not die. However, his body was extremely mangled from the explosion. Sandra and the other soldiers rushed as fast as they could to try and get him inside. But of course, the streets were still littered with rebel soldiers everywhere. However, luckily, we did manage to find an empty building where no one was occupying, and that way we could take the captain inside and try to tend to his wounds and stop the bleeding before he died. A grueling task, no doubt, but it had to be done. On the other side of town, Mitchell led the team of soldiers to an occupied building that they felt was stuffed with rebel soldiers. This building was said to have been the original base for the rebels in this town, making it a very obvious target for the marshals, of course. The idea here is that Mitchell would give the signal and then we would breach the doors. Just like a flash, Mitchell gave the signal and entered the building, and we were all quickly engaged by rebel soldiers. One of our men accidentally fired a toxic gas canister into the building. Attempting to not breathe in the toxic gas, the rebel soldiers began to try and flee out of the entrance where they were engaged by our soldiers. Many of them died, and the others actually ended up surviving and getting away. It was hard to see through the gas. Norman stripped one of our soldiers of their gas mask and equipped it for herself. She was hell-bent on killing any rebels within the building. Just as well, though, she would need to engage any rebels within the building to distract them so that Konar could try and rescue any soldiers, such as Captain Mitchell. Upon entering the next room, a very large room I might add, Norman was shocked to see that it was completely empty. No furniture, no resources, no rebels. But there was a voice shouting from a small room. Upon entering the room, we discovered Scott, covered in blood and soot and ash. It would appear that the rebels had been keeping him captive here. He quickly explained to Norman who he was and that he was originally part of the team just before she joined, of course, and Norman took him into custody. He unfortunately made no mention of Beryl or anything that may have happened to her, but we'll ask him about that later. The two of them began to leave the building to group up with the other soldiers. After we finally were able to get everyone back to the base, Captain Hawthorne and Captain Mitchell both were in critical condition, both of them extremely injured. Captain Hawthorne's entire body was basically shredded by that rocket, just as well Captain Mitchell had taken a shotgun blast to the face. But with all things considered, both of them were still alive, and truly that was the most important thing. We could always try and recover from our injuries, but death is inescapable. But I do feel that this scene of the two of them laying together here in the medical bay with blood just smeared all across the floor truly shows just how much of a toll that battle took on them. Of course, it was well worth it because we did liberate the town of Preston and it is now under Marshal control. Just as well we did manage to recover Scott, who I might add is now currently having an interview with Lieutenant Verne on exactly as to what happened and led to him being in that small room in the town of Preston. The story seemed believable enough. Scott explained exactly what happened after the helicopter was shot out of the sky. He and Beryl attempted to survive in the wilderness until coming upon the town of Dover, where they then joined the Marshals in a battle. Of course, they were defeated in that battle and captured by Shortus and his artillerymen. He explained that the rebels interrogated the two of them, and Beryl attempted to escape several times, leading to her inevitable death, unfortunately. Scott was then transferred to the town of Preston, where the rebels had planned on using him as leverage in terms of some type of bargaining chip, essentially. He was also there with several other soldiers who we saw in the room, but unfortunately they were killed. Lieutenant Verne seemed to be fairly convinced by the story that Scott had told, and allowed him to rejoin them there at the mining empire. Only time will tell, however, if trusting Scott once again was the right choice. In the dead of night, a lone Marshal postman walks the road as an icy wind grips him. He approaches a small, isolated home at the end of the road. Out of this isolated home walks none other than Maya Hawthorne. The postman quickly drops off the letter to the captain's sister and then begins his journey elsewhere. Dear sister, I hope that you are well. The recent caravans of soldiers have yet to bring me any word from you. Guys, I would just love to thank you guys ever so much for watching. You guys are amazing, I love you, and I appreciate your patience with me here recently, especially with this episode. I know we're a bit delayed. Normally we get 2 out per week. By this time we should have been on episode 7, I think. Probably even getting ready to work on episode 8. So I've just been sick for a little while, so I apologize. It was really hard for me to actually record this because of talking. I had to do it over 2 separate days because the first day I was a little bit worse, and you know, even today doing these, finishing up the voice lines for this episode, I've been having to cough and clear my throat, and just, you know, it's been awful. So I apologize for that if I do sound kind of shitty throughout this entire video. But I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun with this one. I always love narrating these battles and stuff like that. I love narrating in general, but just the battles and stuff for me they're really fun. But once again, guys, thank you for watching. I love you guys. I hope to see you in the next one, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.